Today's text is 34. So I'm doing word by word in translation, and then we'll do the verse. Kwa, where, cha, also, aham, I, kitava, a cheater, papa, all sins personified, Brahma Gyana, the killer of my Brahminical culture, Nirapatrapa, shameless, Kwa, where, Cha, also, Narayana, Iti, thus, Etat, this, Bhagavat Nama, the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mangalam, all auspicious. Kwa chaham kitava papo, Kwa chaham kitava papo, Brahmagano nirapatrapa, Brahmagano nirapatrapa, Kocha narayan yati etat, Kocha narayan yati etat, Bhagavan nama mangalam, Bhagavan nama mangalam, Kvachaham kitava papo, Brahmagano nirapatra, Kvacha nirayanati etat, Bhagavan nama mangalam, Someone else chant, please. Translation by His Divine Grace, along with purport. Ajamil continued, I am a shameless cheater who has killed his Brahminical culture. Indeed, I am sin personified. Where am I in comparison to the all-auspicious chanting of the holy name of Lord Narayan? Purport. Those engaged in broadcasting the holy name of Narayan, Krishna, through the Krishna consciousness movement should always consider what our position was before we came and what it is now. We had fallen into abominable lives as meat-eaters, drunkards, and women hunters who had performed all kinds of sinful activities, but now we have been given the opportunity to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Therefore, we should always appreciate this opportunity. By the grace of the Lord, we are opening many branches, and we should use this good fortune to chant the holy name of the Lord and serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. We must be conscious of the difference between our present and past conditions, and should always be very careful not to fall from the most exalted life. Can repeat? Ajamil continued. I am a shameless cheater who has killed his Brahminical culture. Indeed, I am sin personified. Where am I in comparison to the all-auspicious chanting of the holy name of Lord Narayana? Om Agyantimirandasya Ginana Sakalaya Chakshumilitam Jena Tasmi Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskatya Desatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvayevyacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada opens his purport with an admonishment that those who are broadcasting the holy name of Narayan, Krishna, which means every member of the Hare Krishna movement, because this is a preaching movement, and it is our business to broadcast the glories of the Lord, particularly in the form of his holy name. So he gives this little admonishment. We should always consider What was our position before coming? Before we came here, what were we doing? And what is it now? Now, the examples that he gave of abominable lives, he was mentioning meat eating, drunkards, women hunters, all kinds of sinful activities. But now we've been given a chance to chant the Hare Krishna movement. Now, certainly many of you did not perform these kind of abominable sinful activities. At the same time, if we're simply living our lives, even if it's in the mode of goodness, without the presence of Krishna, it is a wasted life. Just like Srila Prabhupada mentions in the introduction to the Nectar of Devotion, that our spiritual life begins with initiation. Initiation brings about, it affects a connection with Krishna. What to speak of our fulfilling the potential of the human form of life? If we're simply living a good life, being pious people, which is good, I'm not saying we shouldn't be pious, but without the connection with Krishna, in Prabhupada's words, we are simply polished cats and dogs. Because this human form of life is that one rare opportunity to find out what is our real business here? What are we doing? Why have we come here? What are we supposed to be doing? And in no other species of life can these questions be answered. And in no other species of life is there a solution to the perplexities of life. In all cases, in all species, there is the hard struggle for existence. We just see it so grossly here in Vrindavan. Krishna gives us so many wonderful examples of the hard struggle for material existence. And every living entity is struggling just to breathe practically, just to get a little fresh water, basic necessities, and it's a struggle. What to speak of eat something, what to speak of just walk down the road. So many dangers. The humans are suffering and the animals are suffering. So we might have been good and pious people, but we're still suffering. And without the connection from Krishna, there is not a bright future. So we have been given the opportunity to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. It may not initially seem like such a big deal because, after all, we have been promulgating Krishna consciousness, very strongly advocating chanting Hare Krishna for the last 50 years through the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. And so the mantra is widely known. It is chanted in all parts of the world. So we may take it a little bit for granted also. Maybe sometimes forgetting what a great boon, what a great gift has been handed to us and entrusted to us, given to us to also share with others. So Prabhupada says we should appreciate this opportunity. We should use this good fortune to chant the holy name of the Lord and serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So our chanting, we need to be conscious of our chanting, not just, of course, any kind of chanting, it's understood, any kind of chanting, even offensive chanting, there is some benefit, but it's kind of like, what is the quality and the quantity of that benefit? So our conscious chanting especially during this month of Kartik, when we have this opportunity to come together and associate with like-minded individuals. Like-minded individuals, meeting devotees of the Lord, who are attempting to go back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada said it's possible in this lifetime. Sometimes the more one chants and the older one gets, the more impossible going back in this lifetime appears. And yet Prabhupada said, in this lifetime we can do it. And we shouldn't waste time not doing it. So we must be very conscious of the difference between our present and past conditions, whether it's a most abominable condition or whether it's been a pious condition. Either condition separated from Krishna is not a condition that will benefit one. And he further admonishes, we should be very careful not to fall from this most exalted life. So, of course, we have been studying very closely this example of Ajamil, who was Sri Krishna, who was born in a pious family, who was performing pious activities. And yet, somehow or other, inexplicably, he saw something that completely turned his life upside down. He was in a forest with trees gathering flowers and roots and herbs for puja. Nowadays, we don't even have to go anywhere to get our eyes full and our ears full of ungodly, unholy situations. Even here in Vrindavan, right next to beautiful pictures of Krishna, are big advertising, fulfill all your desires. And from the pictures, you can see the desires aren't necessarily spiritual desires. Every sight we see, every sound we come in contact, it leaves an impression. That's why some samskaras are performed, because you want to have good impressions. You want auspiciousness. But in the same way, there's opposite impressions, there's degrading impressions. There's impressions that just cover your soul in darkness. Ajamil was not exposed from the beginning of his life to any of these horrible impressions. And yet, just by seeing one illicit activity, he was impacted and fell down. So what about all of us? Compared to many of us, Ajamil was a saintly character. In fact, previously he had been. But what could he, somehow or other, he was prompted, it was explained, he was prompted by the Supersoul to name his son Narayan. Nowadays, people, they name their children interesting names. Here in India, I see this name Pinky. What does that mean? But Pinky is the name, or some other silly name is being given to children. Your name is a very important part of your life. It forms an impression. And therefore, those who are sober and thoughtful and desirous of serving Krishna, they choose names for their children that remind them of Krishna, that will remind their children of Krishna, that will remind others of Krishna. One devotee tells the story how his children, due to circumstance, they had to go to public school. Maybe we might say Karmi school. His children had names like Govinda and Radha, names of Krishna. And in school they have to call you by your name. So somehow or other in that school, which was totally devoid of any spiritual activity or spiritual life, by the presence of these children with spiritual names, the holy names of Lord Krishna and his consort was being chanted. When one takes spiritual initiation, it's mentioned earlier in this chapter, so when you undergo initiation, you're given a name that reminds you of Krishna. And Prabhupada said this is absolutely necessary, this changing of names, because you're shedding your old life, you're shedding your old manners. You're taking a new birth. When everybody is born, they're given a name. So what to speak of when you take your second birth? You're getting a name that reminds you of Krishna. One time in one temple in the West, the leader kind of got a little bit off track. And among other things, he was also a guru. He began giving, first it was just strange names, like Sanskrit names, kind of. And then it just was like full-on English names, which weren't so bad in context, because they were names like Holy Name, or, names like that, Eternal Love. But he also gave names like Khichdi, Halava, and Jalebi. Now, if it was Khichdi Prasadam, Halava Prasadam, and Jalebi Prasadam, and maybe, or Krishna Prasadam, maybe that could have passed the radar. But, a name that reminds you of food, we want to avoid these kind of discrepancies. So everything that we do in our spiritual life, every activity is so important. And our lives should be molded. Prabhupada expresses in one purport in the Gita, our lives should be molded in such a way that we never forget Krishna. And having these spiritual names, we help other people never forget Krishna. So anyway, this Ajamil, he fell down from his Brahminical culture and said he lived a long time, totally oblivious to his past, totally oblivious to the havoc he had wreaked in his life. And then at that last moment of death, which is falling upon some of us, coming closer and closer, he called out for his son with affection, because it was his son. But the unexpected, unintended result was that by chanting the Lord's name without offense, even though he wasn't intending to call for the Lord, but he said the name of the Lord without offense, then he was pulled back from the brink of death. The Yamadutas were there, those glorious personalities who were so fearful, with blazing red hair and eyes and black skin, and they carry a noose, a rope in their neck, and there's just like fire coming out of their very being. They were there, ready to claim him. And by the beautiful sound of Narayan's name, the Vishnu Dutas came. And they're so beautiful. And they're blazing also, but blazing with effulgence, golden effulgence, looking just like Lord Vishnu. And they stopped the Yamadutas. You can't take him. They had a little debate, went back and forth, and then the Yamadutas, they conceded defeat. And then even the Vishnu Dutas disappeared. And the reason for that was to give Ajamil a little bit more life, now that he'd become rectified. A little more time to finish the business of Krishna consciousness. So that was just a person who had a long-term accidental fall down. Of course, we say long-term. That's in this world, long-term, 1 day, even sometimes 1 day seems like long-term. when you have many obstacles. But in the scheme of life, where life of the soul is eternal, this so-called long life of Hajjamil was just a flickering moment. And then he was rectified. So what about a person who has been saved from their sinful lives, were engaged in truly abominable activities, and yet they were saved by the mercy of His divine grace, and then fell down again? What kind of person is that? And even then, Srila Prabhupada is so merciful. He doesn't give up on that person. Just like the Lord in your heart is always waiting for that moment when we'll become fully conscious of Him. Srila Prabhupada is always waiting for that moment when we, who have taken some temporary leave of absence from His service, will come back to Him. And sometimes He comes Himself and pulls you back by your hair. It's not such a very nice thing to leave the service of someone who has saved your life. It's not such a very nice thing to abandon the spiritual master. But Srila Prabhupada is no ordinary spiritual master. He said of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was not an ordinary man. He saved me. So, in the same way, Prabhupada has stepped forward to save us. His direct disciples, his grand disciples, his grand disciples, on and on, for the next 10,000 years, it is said. So when somebody does something wonderful, like saving your life, there is a debt that is formed. Saving your life in the form of giving you spiritual awareness, and giving you knowledge of transcendental life, of giving you Krishna consciousness, of giving you the holy name. Guru is not asking for payment. He's not demanding a fee. But gratitude must be there. Gratitude is one of the basic beginnings of spiritual life. You have saved me. How can I leave your service? And how do we repay that debt? By remaining in service. Just like Sri Prahlad, Dhruva Maharaj. So he was explaining how due to his material desires, he was falling into a deep well full of snakes. It doesn't sound like a good place to fall. And he was just a beautiful, pure child, but he could understand the fallacy of the material world, falling into a deep well full of snakes. But I was saved by my spiritual master, Sri Narada Muni, who instructed me in the art of transcendence. Therefore, how could I ever leave his service? This is gratitude. And the gratitude is exhibited by following the instructions of the spiritual master. And if one is so unfortunate that they stumble, they fall again and turn away, still the spiritual master is holding out hope for us. And it's never too late. I'm speaking from personal experience in that sorry regards. We should not become too proud of our position. Pride is a destroyer of consciousness, of Krishna consciousness. But there is one thing we can be proud of, one person, and that is Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Because he achieved what no other previous acharya had accomplished in spreading the holy name all over the world, not just within the boundaries of Bharat Bhumi, but all over the world. And in doing this, he fulfilled the perfection. He perfected the words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that my name will be chanted all over the world. Everybody knows he said that, but people were just thinking the world is Bharat Bhumi. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, by taking the Hare Krishna Mahamantra outside of the boundaries of India, has made the entire world Bharat Bhumi. By the chanting of Krishna's holy name, Krishna has manifested in every planet, in every continent. Actually, Prabhupada one time told us that there are deities of Krishna hidden all over the world, waiting to be discovered. He said this. And sometimes it is that some obscure deity of Krishna is found, you know. Srila Prabhupada wrote his purports, quoting extensively from the previous acharyas, passing on the ripened fruit of the Vedic literature and Vedic knowledge, and providing further illuminations. Srila Prabhupada is like the embodiment of the previous acharyas. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Krishnadas Kaviraj, both were elderly when they began their writing. Srila Prabhupada was elderly. They expressed how they were feeling unfit to do the service they were to do, and that their pens were guided by Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada, he also said that I only write what Krishna tells me. He wasn't sitting there thinking of something to say. He was that transparent via medium, simply writing what Krishna was telling him. Would we even know if Krishna told us something? You know. Lord Chaitanya, he made a garland of Krishna Prem to share with the world. And he was giving it out without condition. You take it, you take it. Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya was not even caring who was fit, who was unfit. He didn't have a thermometer of calculations to see if you were at the right temperature to accept this gift. Srila Prabhupada fully encapsulated this mood, fully offering the holy name to anyone who would take it. He tried in the very, very high-end society in New York City, and a few people politely listened, kind of, and left. Nobody took it. Nobody understood what was being offered to them. And he wasn't discouraged. And he was giving in that same mood, giving out, just take it, to anyone who would just show some slight degree or some inclination. He was asked, can you perform miracles? And he looked at us and he said, these are my miracles. Prabhupada gave us deeply ecstatic, esoteric information about the nature of bhakti. It's actually sometimes incredible when you think how intimate details he gave us. Sometimes it's claimed that we were only given first grade grammar. For such people, I wonder, have you read Prabhupada's books? Have you read the purports? Have you considered what is contained within them? Listening to tapes of 1966, prior to the inception of ISKCON, he's speaking to these yoga people in Dr. Mishra's ashram and other places, high level of Krishna consciousness, of Lord Chaitanya's deep, ecstatic, esoteric experiences, his deep ecstasies. And I remember just sitting in that little storefront in San Francisco, hearing how this person, Lord Chaitanya, who was God himself, and how he came in the mood of a devotee just to show us how to be devotees. By his activities, we would know how to be devotees. And then he was telling us about how he would fall into an ecstatic trance, and he'd be down flat on the ground, and foam would be coming out of his mouth, and he couldn't speak properly, and his hairs were standing on end, and blood was streaming from his pores. How esoteric is that? First, can you just imagine? He was telling how Lord Chaitanya was in such ecstatic moments that he couldn't be contained, and so his disciples would lock him into the Gambhira, his rooms in Jagannath Puri, lock him in, and he would be banging his heads on the wall, throwing his body on the wall, causing himself to bleed in ecstatic trance, not feeling anything. I told the story of how he fell into the ocean. He was caught by a fisherman in his net. Totally unconscious, it seemed. And only his devotees could understand. The fisherman was he didn't know, he thought he had gotten a ghost. What is this? He was afraid. He thought it was a ghost. And when he first touched the unconscious body of Lord Chaitanya, he was surcharged with ecstatic emotions. But because of his dullness, he was thinking, oh my God, I caught a ghost, and I've touched him, and now I've become contaminated, and I've become a crazy man, and who's going to take care of my family? He was thinking like this. He couldn't even understand what a good fortune had happened to him. And only the devotees of Mahaprabhu who came could understand just what was going on. So all of this Prabhupada was describing to us, what to speak of the rasa dance, what to speak of Krishna having 16,000 wives. Imagine young people who had never in their entire life heard about Radha, Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, any of this, and 5 minutes later we're hearing these ecstatic descriptions of spiritual life. Simply amazing. I just have a few minutes, and I wanted to say a few words about the auspiciousness of this year, which I'm sure everyone is aware of, but it is the year that Srila Prabhupada departed from India to begin his mission. And it's also the year 500 years ago, at this time, Lord Chaitanya arrived in Sri Vrindavan Dham. So 500 years ago, Lord Chaitanya arrived in Vrindavan, and 50 years ago, Srila Prabhupada left Vrindavan to further the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So there's been several very big and different sizes of celebrations, we'll put it that way. But the biggest one, by and far, was put on by the Calcutta devotees who got really into it kind of almost at the last minute. I mean, pulling off a big event takes a lot of coordination and time, and really they kind of came in under the wire at the last minute. But they hired the Netaji Stadium in Calcutta, which has a seating capacity of 13,000 people, and they had this really ambitious program. that they would fill that stadium twice a day with 13,000 people. Not 13,000, the same people. If you came in the morning, you couldn't come back in the evening. So that meant 26,000 people in one day to celebrate Srila Prabhupada's departure. Yeah. That was on August 13th, 50 years ago, the day that Srila Prabhupada stepped on board the Jaladuta, August 13th, 1965. There was 125 countries represented, countries where there's at least, if not a temple, a presence of Krishna consciousness through Krishna conscious devotees, Namhatas, whatever. 125 countries. And so many of our leading devotees, Bhakti True Swami, Radhanath Swami, Jayapataka Swami, Lokanath Swami, Bhakti Purushottam Swami, they were there and leading this wonderful event. So many dignitaries came. And it was obvious that these people actually knew who Prabhupada was. They weren't just doing a public duty, you're a dignitary and you have to do this service. They knew who was Prabhupada and they knew about his glories. Hrishikesh Mafatlal, who's also known as His Grace Krishna Chandra Prabhu, was there. He's a leading industrial figure and a humble servant of Lord Krishna. N.D. Desai, who is affectionately known by his devotional name, Srinathji Prabhu, and who drove Srila Prabhupada for the final trip from Mumbai to the train station for his final trip to Sri Vrindavan Dham, was there. And there was the chief minister, there was a letter from the governor, and there was a broadcast by Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is a USA congressperson. Now you can say, oh, a politician. Yeah, she's a politician, but she's a Krishna devotee. And she glorified Krishna and Srila Prabhupada, not hiding anything. Sometimes we get devotees, they have certain kind of positions or jobs, and they're like undercover. You can't mention Krishna, Prabhupada, ISKCON, anything, that it may hurt my business. She was out front on national TV, glorifying Lord Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. There was an incredible dance, Das Avatar, by a group known as Prince Dance Troupe. And they were the winners of, I guess it's a big deal, called India's Got Talent. But it was amazing dance they did. And then 450 congregational children from Calcutta did a performance. And at the end, they spelled out on the floor of this Netaji statement, they spelled out Krishna. And there was a poem that Jayapataka Maharaj has written some years ago. It's written in Bengali, and it's a poem in glorification of Srila Prabhupada. And it was rendered into English and put together with music and dance. Very, very beautifully performed. And then there was an unveiling of a murti of Srila Prabhupada. It's more like it's a murti, but it's a, anyway, it's Srila Prabhupada boarding the Jaladuta. So half of the Jaladuta is there. And then, I'll just kind of fast forward, the other half was unveiled in a program in Boston later on, about a couple weeks later, in case I don't get that far. Another feature of this program in Calcutta was that the devotees were going after a Guinness Book of Records. Does most people here know what that means, a Guinness Book of Records? Does anybody not know? I'll try to explain it. Not know. I see a few hands. Okay, so Guinness Book of Records, it's a world, international, it's not a sacred book, but it's a book where people try to do something incredible and become the only person or the only group or the only institution to do that thing. And they get certified. There's judges who come and they judge you to see if you meet the criteria. And then they put you in this book of records. And then, of course, you're there, and that means somebody else is going to try to smash your record. However, they were trying for 3. They achieved 2. The 2 that they achieved was the most countries represented during a single yoga session. And of course, Krishna consciousness is what? Bhakti yoga. So there was 125 people together practicing Bhakti yoga in Netaji Stadium. 125 countries. And then the most persons, the most nationalities in a choir. So what was this choir? Choir means a group of people singing, right? Actually, when we made the Govindam album, what we hear every morning, Govindam Adi Prushan, there were some complaints. You're hearing this woman sing. There's some complaints. And Prabhupada said, no, it is a choir, because we're also singing in the background. So choir, many persons singing. So the most nationalities in a choir. So these 2 things, Guinness Book of Records, the judges came, they presented the certificate, and of course, what was that choir singing? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this festival went on for 3 days, and on the 15th, it was a big day for India because it was your Independence Day. 600 devotees came together, 600 devotees from 125 countries, and performed Mahaharinam in Calcutta, going from the Calcutta Temple to the Victoria Memorial, having the little flags of their country so people could see that this was indeed an international Harinam. And why the Victoria Memorial? Well, because Srila Prabhupada climbed it as a teenager when it was being constructed. He climbed up the scaffolding. And when he told us this on a morning walk in Calcutta, and the scaffolding in India is just some like bamboo tied together. It was like, oh my God, he climbed up there. So one of the devotees said, Srila Prabhupada, you were so brave. Prabhupada said, I'm still brave. So then there was another event in Houston, but I want to quickly mention the Boston event because Boston is where Srila Prabhupada stepped off the Jaladuta in September 17th of 1965. So the month, 50 years he departed and arrived. And many, many, many wonderful devotees were there. Because of time, I won't get into naming them. But I had the good fortune of also being there. And the day began by a letter from the mayor being read from City Hall. And it was proclaiming that day was Bhaktivedanta Swami Day in Boston. And they raised the Indian flag for the first time ever. There was a big Maha Harinam from the temple to the Boston Commons. Now the Boston Commons is it's a great, big, huge, beautiful park. It's kind of like the Central Park of New York and Boston, Boston Commons. And that's where the main event was held because the temple's a little bit small. And there was a specific wonderful event where a big boat was hired. And 900 devotees, obviously not everyone could get on this boat, but 900 devotees could get on the boat, along with Srila Prabhupada, and for 3 hours cruising the Boston Harbor to get an idea what it was like for Srila Prabhupada to enter the shores, to enter into America for the first time, coming by the Commonwealth Pier and hearing wonderful Prabhupada Katha from all the wonderful devotees that were present there, and not at that time, but present on the boat, and of course a wonderful Guru Puja. Then after the boat ride, there was a Harinam from the dock, this was Commonwealth Pier, where Srila Prabhupada first stepped off, back to the festival site. And it was a very phenomenal Harinam. Not all 900 people were in the Harinam, but because not everybody could have. It was a bit of a hike, but it was a very incredible experience. Because at least in the West, sometimes when you do a Harinam, people just like make a face and stand aside or cover their ears or something like that. And sometimes, they even say things negatively. On that day, people were just looking like in awe. What is going on? And they were looking and smiling at the Harinam. They were even stepping aside to allow the Harinam to pass. They weren't doing it because they were angry, because sometimes people are angry. There's this big bunch of devotees and they angrily get out of the way. They were happily stepping out of the way to allow the wonderful river of the Harinam, the tsunami of the Harinam, to pass. And as the Harinam continued and continued, you enter into an area where there is just hundreds and thousands of people, because Boston is a tourist destination. And we would pause and chant. And at each place, people would gather around, and they would just looking with hungry eyes and hungry hearts at this wonderful spectacle. And they would join in different ways by trying to chant, trying to dance. And at one point, I wanted to dance with my god sister Vishaka. And she was carrying my bag, so I came over to her and I took my bag off and I handed it to somebody to hold so I could dance with her. But then the Harinam party started to move along, so we danced along, moving along. And then I remembered, I should get my bag. And I looked around and I suddenly realized I couldn't tell who was a devotee and who was not a devotee. Everybody on the street looked just like a devotee with beautiful, bright, shining, happy faces. And then I realized I don't even know if I gave my bag to a devotee or not. I just didn't even know. It didn't even matter. It was just and people were laughing and chanting. It was such a blissful experience. And I really felt Lord Chaitanya was there with us, and certainly Srila Prabhupada was showering us with his unlimited mercy. So, I'm ending here. I just want to mention, there's some wonderful books available. You want to know about Prabhupada? Well, read about Prabhupada from the books that have been written by his sons and daughters. You have Mukunda Maharaj's book, you have Guru Das's books, and you have Yamuna's Epitome, beautiful book. And now Shamsundar Prabhu has launched his book. And you can be sure it is going to be exciting reading. When I talked to him, he said there were 3 volumes, but maybe he crunched it down to 2, but it's not going to be like a little book. And it's going to be detailing his different adventures with Srila Prabhupada, his service with Srila Prabhupada. It'll give you a background of the time, what it was like before ISKCON, manifested at that era, what happened after ISKCON manifested. And he's named the book Chasing Rhinos with the Swami. Now, maybe some of you are kind of wondering, what does that mean? But Srila Prabhupada used to push us on to preach in different creative, innovative ways. And the bigger, the better. And he said, if you're going to go hunting, shoot for a rhino. Because even if you fail, they'll say, anyway, it was impossible anyway. But if you succeed, very good, very good. So he wasn't going to name it, shooting rhinos with Srila Prabhupada, but he was advised that might be a little off-putting to some people nowadays. So he was given the advice by Radhanath Swami, which he accepted, Chasing Rhinos. But you can look it up. It's available by order on internet. It's chasingrhinos.com. So please look it up and get your copy. And I'll end here. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And I'm a little late. Thank you very much. All glories to His divine grace. Say, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri